Aston Villa nil, Arsenal 2. Here's everything that we learned from that game of football. I'm going to start off by talking about the lineups for the teams on the day, starting off with Arsenal, who brought in Jurgen Timber from their 2-0 win against Wolves at home and in replacement of Alexander Zinchenko, which I thought was, to be expected. I think Zinchenko, on the ball, he's fantastic, but I think defensively, away from home, against the top side, you're going to need a bit more defensive resilience of Timber. And actually, I think Timber did so well that I'm now looking ahead to the next game because he played 78 minutes in this game, only just came off the bench against Wolves towards the end of that game last week. Arsenal next play Brighton and Hove Albion at home, and Brighton, as we saw against Man United, are a fantastic side going forward. I'm thinking about who's going to play on that right hand side, and I'm thinking it's going to be Minter, and I do just think to myself, maybe that's another one where Timber plays. So long term, maybe some questions about Zinchenko. I think Timber did fantastically. I also think that was very telling, the fact that Calafiori was the one who came on to replace Timber and it wasn't Zinchenko. So I think that maybe shows that Arteta going forward doesn't trust Zinchenko defensively, and that in big games away from home, Champions League, it's probably going to be, maybe Timber, Calafiori, maybe even someone like a Tomiyasu who's going to come into the game. He was injured, unfortunately, for this one, so maybe Arteta would have brought him on instead. But yeah, I think long term, first of all, I think Zinchenko does have some issues that he needs to work on, because I think Timber going forward is probably going to be the first choice left back. And Aston Villa, they were unchanged side, but despite the fact that they lost the game against Arsenal, I actually think the man of the match for me was Morgan Rogers. I mean, I think he absolutely dominated. He really shone in this game. I think he had 5 out of 7 successful dribbles in this game. He showed a lot of strength, power, and not only going forward, but defensively, he was fantastic as well. But I just want to highlight one bit of play because I thought it was absolutely brilliant from him. And as you look at it here, he doesn't really have too many options. John McGinn is being marked by both Ben White and Thomas Partey, and Ollie Watkins has got Saliba and Gabriel ahead of him with their pace and power. That pass isn't really on. Leon Bailey is lagging a bit behind. He's actually in line with Morgan Rogers here. So there's not really much for him to do here. But what he does go on to do here is absolutely fantastic. Because I'm looking at this now thinking there is no pass on whatsoever. The only one that's, a decent option in the attack is to pass it to Luka Dean. He's making the overlapping run. He's a little bit behind play as well. But, that's an easy pass. And he's got Declan Rice on his shoulder. But what does he do? He decides to ignore him completely and decides to chop inside. And see you later, Declan Rice. That is a £100 million midfielder that he's just sent to the shops. And now it looks like there's potentially a pass on to Ollie Watkins. But no, that wasn't enough. He has to cut in on his inside again and beat Declan Rice once more. And again, I'm thinking to myself, pass it to Luka Dean on the outside. He's in space, he's got time, and he's got a good delivery to put the ball into the box. You've got Martin Odegaard closing on you. You've got Declan Rice, who you've sent twice, but he's still there. He's still in a dangerous area. And you've also got Thomas Partey closing you down. But what does he do? He doesn't listen to me. He decides to drive through them and take them completely out of the game and run towards the defense because, why wouldn't you with all that pressure on you? And for the third time, I'm screaming at my TV, okay, that's enough. Now pass it to Luka Dean on the outside. But of course, he's got wonderful feet, power, precision on the ball, and he doesn't listen to me, and he takes it right through the heart of Arsenal defence. And he ends up putting a very dangerous ball into the box, and if it wasn't for a stern left hand by David Raya, that could have been a chance for Aston Villa to take the lead in this game. And that's what I'm talking about. This isn't a player who's world class, but this play itself was. I mean, the amount of players that he's taken. Martin Odegaard, Declan Rice, Thomas Partey, William Saliba, causing Gabriel issues. This is a player who's 22 years of age. He was playing in the Championship just last season. He shouldn't be doing this. The fact that interim England manager Lee Carsey was in the stands watching, he would have been very, very impressed with him. And I think throughout the entire game, I think there's another one in the second half where he just absolutely bodies Thomas Partey. Thomas Partey, who's 30, 31, played at the highest level in Champions League with Atletico Madrid and now with Arsenal, and the fact that he just breezes past him so easily, I think is absolutely phenomenal. And despite the fact that he was on the losing side, I think for me Morgan Rogers was man of the match. So one key takeaway, Morgan Rogers is a future star. And from one player who I thought had a fantastic game to another one, and this time from Arsenal, who I think had a bit of a stinker, for being completely honest, and that is Gabriel Martinelli. 2 seasons ago, he was level with Bukayo Saka, scoring a ton of goals and being really important to his Arsenal side, getting 15 goals and 5 assists. However, last season he only got 6 goals and 4 assists, so his output dropping by half. And now this season, I think in the first 2 games, I think he struggled a little bit. And to illustrate my point further, I've got the 2 heat maps, so Bukayo Saka and Gabriel Martinelli, the 2 players who are the wide forwards for Arsenal in this game. And the heat map on the top is Saka's, and the one below is Martinelli. And if you think about the touches that both players had in this game, Martinelli only had 27 and Bukayo Saka had 47 in this game. And yes, you can maybe make an argument that Saka played a whole 20 minutes more than Martinelli, but I think at that point in the game, Martinelli was less influential. He was struggling a little bit, and I think you had the option of the bench of Trossard, so that was a logical change to make. But not only the touches, you think about what they did with those touches. Yes, Martinelli made one key pass over the course of the game, but I think Saka was more influential. If you think about their passes throughout the entire game, Martinelli had a successful passing accuracy of 76%, whereas Bukayo Saka had one of 96%. So you just think about where they're getting the ball and think about what they're doing with the ball. I think Saka is clearly, more influential to the Arsenal side, and Martinelli was needed to be taken off. And I did think to myself before the game that Martinelli could have some joy down that Aston Villa right-hand side. I looked at Matty Cash and I think to myself, out of all the Aston Villa defenders, he's probably the weak link in that defence. If you think about the goal that they conceded against West Ham, I think it was a penalty where Matty Cash gets a tangle of legs with Thomas Souček. I do think to myself that if you're a side chasing for the Champions League on a regular basis and competing in it, I think Matty Cash is probably at most a squad player. But I do think one of the things that changed the game in Aston Villa's favour and which really neutralised Martinelli was the fact that Costa Nedeljkovic came on when Cash got injured. And considering the fact that he's an 18-year-old Serbian, new to the Premier League, I thought he did fantastically well. The 18-year-old won 5 tackles over the course of the game and won 6 of 8 ground duels, and I thought he was absolutely fantastic. He did not give Martinelli absolutely anything. He was very mature for his age with his performance. He stayed on his feet, stayed with the player, kept his eye on the ball, and gave Arsenal nothing down that left-hand side. So I think that's a very promising player that Aston Villa have for the future, as well as Morgan Rogers. But I think Morgan Rogers is, on his way to becoming a brilliant player at the moment. But I do think that one area that he did struggle was when Leandro Trossard came off the bench, because I think with his movement, is not the quickest player, Leandro Trossard, but I think with his movement, he was really able to hurt Aston Villa in behind and in front of goal. And of course, he ends up getting the first goal. And I do want to highlight Trossard's movement here, because it perfectly encapsulates that you don't always need to be the quickest player in order to find yourself with a little bit of room and to get a shot away. And as you can see here, as Thomas Partey plays the ball out to Bukayo Saka on the right-hand side, where is Trossard's starting position? He's all the way at the top of the picture on the left-hand side on the edge of the box, and he's completely out of the game for now. Watch how he ends up getting himself involved in the game. And he can't really see it in this one, but Saka ends up getting the ball and Trossard is still out of the game. He's still not really involved in the play at all, but he's on his toes, he's ready, and watch what his movement happens next. Saka plays the ball back to Odegaard, and you can see from the top of the picture, Trossard is there. He's waiting for the ball. He's calling for it. The ball doesn't quite find him, but his reaction to it is perfect. Because as Rodgers unfortunately fluffs his lines here, who's the Arsenal player on the move? It's Trossard. Is anyone else on the move? Not really. Konza is maybe trying to get the ball and going in the wrong direction. You've got an Aston Villa player on the floor. Got all of them on their heels waiting to see what Rodgers does with it. And same for the Arsenal players. Havertz doesn't quite get to it. Declan Rice is just trying to get his eyes on the ball because he can't see it around the player. And Trossard is the only player on the move anticipating any sort of game whatsoever. He's probably expecting Rodgers to maybe take a touch and dribble out with it and maybe he can intercept it. He ends up taking way too heavy a touch, and it's a perfect time for Trossard to get a goal. And for me, Martinelli at the moment isn't playing well. Trossard is, and so what we need to know for going for the next game against Brighton, Arsenal need to be starting Trossard up front. I do feel a little bit sorry for Martinelli, because if you think about the season where he did have his best season 2 years ago, if you think about the players around him, he had Zinchenko at left back, he had Granit Xhaka at left centre midfield, and he had Gabriel Jesus up front. All of those players around him have completely changed. It is now Timber at left back, it is now Declan Rice at left centre midfield, and it is now Kai Havertz up front as well. So everything around him has changed, but he also needs to adapt to that as well to prove that he's a player quality enough to be staying in this Arsenal side. And talking about players who didn't have a great game, Ollie Watkins, 2 big chances, 2 misses. And this is the first one of them. Morgan Rogers dispossesses Thomas Partey in the middle. He ends up finding Ollie Watkins in this amount of space in the penalty area. Is so rare, and he has to take this chance. I don't blame him for taking it first time. I think as a striker, if you're running onto the ball there in the penalty area, you see the goalkeeper running to try and get into position because he's completely out of it. You can understand him for taking the shot the first time, but he has to be hitting the target. At the very minimum, he has to be hitting the target here. And the fact that he skews it wide, doesn't even give David Raya a save to make, is criminal. And for me, Watkins should be doing a whole lot better here. But if you think to yourself, if he gets another chance, surely he'll take it this time, won't he? Well, he doesn't, does he? Because of course we have this one where he's got a free header just on the outside of the 6-yard box, and he should absolutely score. I chose this one in particular for 2 reasons. First of all, from the Aston Villa perspective and the Ollie Watkins perspective, he should absolutely be scoring. Goalkeeper is on the floor. Head that to your right hand side, to the goalkeeper's left, and he's got no chance of getting there. I mean, the fact that not only David Raya makes a save, but the fact that he ends up clawing it away, so Leon Bailey isn't able to get on the end of it either. It just shows what a great save it was. But, you know, if you're Aston Villa, two big chances you've created against this Arsenal side, one of the best defences in the league last year, or a team that was tough to break down in this game as well. But Watkins, you should be scoring. And the second reason why I showed it is because to highlight what a fantastic save it was by David Raya. I mean, the fact that he is on the floor as Ollie Watkins makes contact with the ball and is able to get himself up and dive to his left, a full length stretch dive to his left hand side, and he makes it and he palms it away from Ollie Watkins. There are two sides to every story, and I think this one from Arsenal, you know, there's been a few criticisms of David Raya last season. He's fantastic at claiming high balls in the area. He's fantastic at distribution as well. But can he make a difference as a goalkeeper who saves Arsenal and keeps them in matches? And you probably think about goalkeepers like so Alisson at Liverpool, the amount of like crucial saves he makes. And well, I think this clearly highlighted the David Raya has that ability in him. If he does it week in, week out, then he can really bail Arsenal out of trouble and can really be that world-class goalkeeper that Mikel Arteta clearly sees in David Raya. If you think about last season, he got a save percentage of 68.1%. So far in the season, of course, Arsenal haven't conceded any goals, so he's got a save percentage of 100% from the 6 shots that he saved. And also, if you think about the post-shot expected XG, 1.2. So based on the games against Wolves and Aston Villa, they should have scored at least one goal according to the stats. Well, they haven't because of the phenomenal of David Raya. And in that Wolves game, if you remember, he also made a fantastic save as well. But I think the last 2 weeks have highlighted to me the fact that it's going to be a long season for Villa. And Ollie Watkins had a phenomenal injury record last year. Barely missed a game, barely missed any minutes whatsoever. So, you know, the players underneath him are going to have to step up. And I think it's one where I would maybe like to see John Duran next week against Leicester City. Just because I think Watkins going away to the Euros hasn't had any minutes in pre-season and he does look a little bit rushed. To give him a little bit of a rest because he's probably going to get called up to England as well, so he's not going to get a rest in the international break. And John Duran, you know, he's highly linked with the move away to West Ham, to Chelsea, to loads of different clubs over the course of the summer. It looks like now he's entering the final week of the transfer window. So give him a chance because last season he did get 5 goals in all competitions for Aston Villa from 27 matches played. But I think this time round, you know, he's already got 1 goal in the 2 matches he's played. Start him against Leicester. Give him a chance to prove that, you know, he's enough to be a deputy to Ollie Watkins. And if he does really well enough, then, you know, he could potentially even be starting alongside him. Maybe he can move Morgan Rogers a bit back as well. I don't know. But I just think that Ollie Watkins needs a rest. And it's time for John Duran to start. And for Arsenal, like I mentioned, Trossard coming off the bench was absolutely clutch. He should probably be starting next week. But I do have some further issues with Arsenal's attack in general. I think they're maybe too reliant on Bukayo Saka on the right hand side and all the players going down that side. I don't blame him because the left hand side, you know, is a toss of a coin who you want to start. I think for me it has to be Trossard going forward. But also the injury of Gabriel Jesus obviously picked up a knock before the game. And it does raise a few questions because with Jesus injured, the options you had, obviously Trossard, who did come on the pitch and got the opening goal. You also had Reece Nelson, who's been linked with the move away. You've also got Eddie Nketiah. But I do just think to myself, you know, Nketiah, you know, linked with the likes of Olympique Marseille and Nottingham Forest. Looks like he might go to Crystal Palace now. Nelson's been looking for a move as well. That will only leave Arsenal with Jesus and Trossard in that front 5. And it's just one where I think Arsenal need to be signing a striker. Maybe not a striker, maybe a forward player to be on the left as well, but someone with a bit of X factor. I'm not sure quite what that is. I don't know if it's height because Havertz is the only striker over 6 foot in the Arsenal front line. Maybe it's a bit of pace because you don't have anyone electric. For me, I think what's most important is goals. Goals and assists. The attacking output of a 4 player is so crucial. Maybe a bit like Liverpool where they had Salah and Mane and Roberto Firmino as kind of facilitator. Maybe Havertz can facilitate another player on the left-hand side. I don't quite know who it is. Maybe it's Ivan Toney. I don't think so, if I'm being honest. Maybe it's a Victor Osimhen. He might be a bit expensive, especially in his wages. But I definitely think that Arsenal need another 4 player, another X factor, because I think Trossard, while clutch coming off the bench, if he's starting next week, who are going to bring off, especially if Martinelli's not in great form, Jesus is injured, Nelson isn't, you know, quality to be starting week in, week out. There definitely needs to be another 4 player in that Arsenal front line. And then for Villa, I think they can generally feel a little bit unlucky because I think they were the better side on the day. They did create the better chances, but if you don't take your chances, you will get punished. And I think for this Arsenal side, to now go away to Aston Villa and somewhere where they dropped 3 points, I mean, they didn't beat Villa, they lost to them twice last season. To get that over them now, I think is something that really will give them a lot of encouragement going into the rest of the season. And I think for Villa, I mean, it's a disappointing result, but it's Arsenal. I mean, it's one of the top sides in the Premier League, one of the two competing for the Premier League alongside Manchester City. So it's not the end of the world. You probably hope that, Ollie Watkins could have taken the chances. Martinez maybe could have kept the Thomas Partey shot from distance outside. And I think it's one where, it's a little bit unlucky, but I think you can go into the rest of the season with a lot of confidence knowing that you can do well going forward. And for me, I think we learned a lot of things from that game of football, from Arsenal's perspective and Aston Villa's perspective. However, it is still very early on, only 2 games in. I think this game won't define either of their seasons, but I think it's a good start for Arsenal, and I think it's unlucky and things to work on for Aston Villa. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.